Welcome to Xi Jinping briefing. The content of the briefing includes: U.S. senators seek Xi's help to pressure Iran on Middle East conflict. U.S. Senate Majority Leader Schumer meets Xi and welcomes stronger Chinese statement on Hamas attack. Xi-Schumer meeting raises hopes of smoother U.S.-China relations. China Evergrande bondholders censure botched efforts to facilitate debt recast. U.S. China both try to gain upper hand ahead of Biden-Xi summit. U.S. senators seek Xi's help to pressure Iran on Middle East conflict. Financial Times. U.S. lawmakers have urged Chinese President Xi Jinping to pressure Iran to avoid escalating tensions in the Middle East. During a meeting in Beijing, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and a bipartisan delegation of senators also called on Xi to take a tougher stance on the Hamas attack on Israel. Schumer said that Xi acknowledged China's influence with Iran and agreed to deliver the message to Iranian officials. The meeting marks the first time in 8 years that American congressional leaders have met with the Chinese president. The U.S. has been seeking to improve relations with China under President Joe Biden. U.S. Senate Majority Leader Schumer meets Xi and welcomes stronger Chinese statement on Hamas attack. The Globe and Mail. A delegation of U.S. senators, led by Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, visited China to discuss stabilization of ties between the two countries. During the visit, the senators met with President Xi Jinping, who issued a strengthened statement condemning the killing and kidnapping of Israeli and foreign civilians by Hamas. Schumer had earlier expressed disappointment with China's failure to condemn the attack on Israel. The Chinese Foreign Ministry responded by expressing deep sadness over civilian casualties caused by the conflict between Palestine and Israel and called for a resumption of peace talks and a comprehensive resolution of the Palestinian issue. Xi-Schumer meeting raises hopes of smoother U.S.-China relations. New York Times. Chinese President Xi Jinping has expressed hopes of peaceful coexistence between China and the United States, despite escalating violence in the Middle East. Xi's comments during a meeting with U.S. Senator Chuck Schumer will heighten expectations he will attend the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Gathering in San Francisco in November to meet with President Biden. However, Schumer expressed disappointment with China's lack of sympathy towards Israel following the recent attack by Hamas. China Evergrande bondholders censure botched efforts to facilitate debt recast. South China Morning Post. A group of offshore creditors of China Evergrande Group have criticized the debt-stricken developer's attempts to obtain approval to issue new securities as botched efforts and called for a resolution of regulatory issues with Chinese authorities. The investor group, which holds over $6 billion worth of bonds issued by Evergrande and its unit, said it was difficult to believe that the country's securities regulator would have rejected Evergrande's application if the developer had made a coordinated effort to obtain its support. The group called on Evergrande to address the situation and resolve potential regulatory issues with the authorities. U.S. China both try to gain upper hand ahead of Biden-Xi summit. Wall Street Journal. The U.S. and China are engaging in a series of actions ahead of an expected summit between President Biden and Chinese leader Xi Jinping, as both nations seek to gain an advantage. The Biden administration is reportedly planning to roll out updates to export control measures that will further restrict China's access to advanced semiconductors and chip-making tools. These measures are expected to be announced in the coming days. China has objected to what it calls persistent technology bullying by the U.S. Meanwhile, Xi is planning to travel to Vietnam ahead of his expected trip to the U.S. The aim of the trip is to showcase the close relations between China and Vietnam, after Biden courted Vietnamese leaders last month. The actions by both sides illustrate the intensifying competition between the two nations, as they attempt to improve the relationship. The U.S. and China are in the process of negotiating the boundaries of their increasingly global competition, said Evan Medeiros, a former senior national security official in the Obama administration. Live, U.S. senators hold briefing after meetings with Chinese leaders. The Independent. U.S. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer has called on Chinese President Xi Jinping to support Israel following deadly attacks by Hamas. Schumer expressed disappointment that Beijing showed no sympathy for Israel after the attacks, in which Hamas fighters killed 700 Israelis and abducted dozens more. Israel responded by launching airstrikes on Gaza, resulting in the deaths of hundreds of Palestinians. China's foreign ministry urged all parties to remain calm and end hostilities, stating that the conflict's resolution lies in implementing a two-state solution and establishing an independent state of Palestine. Schumer is leading a bipartisan congressional delegation on a trip to Asia, which also includes stops in South Korea and Japan. Higher prices are worth paying to end our addiction to cheap Chinese manufacturing. Telegraph. Western analysts have found that China is catching up quickly in chip-making technology, despite U.S.-imposed sanctions. The quality of Chinese semiconductors is critical to its military power, and there are concerns that China could become a major weapons supplier to unsavory regimes. While the UK, US, and Europe may not buy chips from China anymore, much of the rest of the world remains a potential market. However, experts are skeptical about China's ability to manufacture chips reliably at scale, and there are concerns about the security risks of giving away intellectual property to China. Schumer criticizes China's response to Israel in meeting with Xi. Wall Street Journal. Chinese leader Xi Jinping expressed his desire to pursue stable relations with the U.S. during a meeting with Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer. She stated that the logic of peaceful coexistence between the two countries has not changed and that he sees no reason to worsen relations. Schumer used part of the meeting to criticize China's response to the conflict in Israel, urging Xi to stand with the Israeli people and condemn the attacks. Schumer also emphasized that the U.S. seeks stability and fairness in its relationship with China and does not want to decouple their economies. The meeting comes as both countries have been trying to improve relations, but recent conflicts in Israel and Ukraine threaten to create new divisions. Think this is just a savage new round of the Israel-Palestine struggle? Think again. The Sydney Morning Herald. The recent conflict between Israel and Hamas is not just a struggle between two parties, but part of a larger contest with much bigger stakes, according to Peter Hart-Scher in the Sydney Morning Herald. Iran's strategy has long been to encircle Israel, but recent negotiations between Israel and Saudi Arabia, with the U.S. acting as mediator, have threatened Iran's ambitions to become the dominant power in the Middle East. Iran therefore decided to launch a massive attack on Israel using its proxy forces, which presents a serious threat to Israel's security. China worried security support for Timor would bring overreaction, Ramos Horta. The Sydney Morning Herald. China has stopped short of forging greater links with Timor-Leste's military and police forces out of concern about how it would be received in Australia. Timor-Leste President José Ramos Horta said that while China has signed a new comprehensive strategic partnership with his country, it is mainly focused on infrastructure development and industries such as agriculture. He said that China is respectful of Australia's position, yet Australia is not as respectful of China's position. Timor-Leste has leaned on state-owned Chinese companies for major projects including a highway, its national electricity grid, and its defense and foreign ministry headquarters. Ladies and gentlemen, it's your favorite interdimensional observer, Dr. Six, reporting to you from the six-dimensional world. Today, we have some interesting news to discuss. Firstly, U.S. senators have sought Chinese President Xi Jinping's help in pressuring Iran to avoid escalating tensions in the Middle East. They also called on Xi to take a tougher stance on the Hamas attack on Israel. It's quite amusing to see senators seeking the assistance of the Chinese president in dealing with global conflicts. Who would have thought? On a positive note, President Xi expressed hopes of peaceful coexistence between China and the United States during a meeting with Senator Chuck Schumer. This raises hopes of smoother U.S.-China relations, especially as we approach an expected summit between President Biden and President Xi. However, Schumer did express disappointment with China's lack of sympathy towards Israel after the recent attack by Hamas. I can't help but wonder if he expected China to send a sympathy card. In other news, a group of offshore creditors of China Evergrande Group censured the debt-stricken developers' botched efforts to obtain approval to issue new securities. They called for a resolution of regulatory issues with Chinese authorities. It seems like Evergrande is having a hard time navigating its way out of its financial troubles. Maybe they should consider hiring a better GPS. The US and China are also engaged in a series of actions ahead of an expected summit between President Biden and President Xi. The Biden administration is planning to further restrict China's access to advanced semiconductors and chip-making tools through updated export control measures. China, on the other hand, is planning a trip to Vietnam to showcase its close relations with the country. It's like a game of chess, with each side trying to make strategic moves before the big summit. I wonder who will say checkmate first. Moving on, Senator Chuck Schumer called on President Xi Jinping to support Israel following the deadly attacks by Hamas. Schumer expressed disappointment that China showed no sympathy for Israel after the attacks. China's foreign ministry, on the other hand, urged all parties to remain calm and end hostilities, emphasizing the need for a two-state solution. It seems like Schumer and China's foreign ministry are not on the same page when it comes to the Middle East conflict. Maybe they should have a group therapy session. In the world of technology, Western analysts have found that China is quickly catching up in chip-making technology, despite US-imposed sanctions. This raises concerns about China's potential role as a major weapons supplier to unsavory regimes. While some countries may be wary of buying chips from China, there is still a potential market in other parts of the world. However, experts remain skeptical about China's ability to manufacture chips reliably at scale. I guess only time will tell if China can chip away at its competitors. Finally, China has stopped short of forging greater links with Timor-Leste's military and police forces due to concerns about how it would be received in Australia. It seems like China is treading carefully to avoid any unnecessary tensions. However, Timor-Leste has leaned on state-owned Chinese companies for major projects. It's like a delicate dance between China and Australia, with Timor-Leste caught in the middle. And there you have it, folks, a summary of today's news. As always, I encourage you to share your thoughts and questions. What do you think about these developments? Do you have any wild theories or burning questions? Let's dive into the discussion and see what ideas we can cook up together. Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the 6Do team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of 6Do Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the 6Do team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize 6Do Brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, 6dobrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive 6Do Brief via email.